Scrid Spy enters the battlefield, and target player reveals cards from the top of his or her library until he reveals land. Like I said, there are a lot of cards that do that. This is plays well with the Demir cards, obviously. So it's pretty fun. You can copy it and do kind of fun stuff with that as well. It's just a 2/3 for 4 other than that. So playable as a creature somewhat, but not really going to be too impactful except for his tricks. And even then, I don't know how useful, like I said. I mean, milling in a 40 card format is a lot better than it is in a 60 because your opponent's life total is only doubled instead of tripled. Essentially, because you have to mill, but the cards do more damage, obviously, if you look at it that way. I mean, you're going to be milling for 7 or 10, whereas a spell would be doing 3 damage or 5 damage. So it's all a sliding scale, but it is pretty hard to pull off a mill deck versus 60. But in limited, it's a viable thing. Basilica Screechers got flying. It's 2 for a 1/2. That's not bad at all. I don't really have a problem with that. It's got extort, so I think it's playable because it's going to come down early. It's going to have flying. It's going to get a couple points of damage just from attacking. That's also going to have that extort mechanic so that the cards that you play later on are going to fluctuate the life. Contaminated Ground makes something a swamp. This isn't really going to be useful unless your opponent is completely mana screwed, because then this will be funny to play, but it's so conditional that I don't want it in my deck when I'm building it. Corpse Blockade has Defender, so I don't really care about it. You can sacrifice another creature and it gets Death Touch, which is fun. I do love Death Touch, but I'm not a huge fan of walls, like I said. Cryptghast is just a way for black to mana ramp, which is kind of out of the ordinary. It also has Extort. This is really kind of an in-game card, though. It is 4 mana, so it's a little expensive. It's something that you're probably going to want to put into your deck just because it doubles your mana, but you still want to keep in mind the fact that it is a 4-drop that's only a 2/2 creature. So the Extort's not going to be super useful. The mana ramp is a little bit late. It's just one of those things where it's obviously a good card on paper, but I don't know if in practice it's going to be too useful. Death's Approach is going to give Neg-X, where X is the number of creature cards in its controller's graveyard. This card is probably not going to be very solid removal, so I wouldn't really count on it too much. If you have any other way to get rid of creatures, I would put it in ahead of this card. We've got Devour Flesh, sacrifice a creature, gain life equal to that creature's toughness. This is actually a great instant if you're doing tricks, but in limited, like I said, you kind of want to model after being closer to having just removal and not really doing any kind of these tricks. This is obviously going to probably have your opponent waste a spell if they were trying to get rid of a creature, and then you're going to gain life, which is a good thing when you're also wasting an opponent's spell. And it does change board state, which can mess up battle math and stuff like that, because you can use it on them too. So it would be a little different. It's kind of like a weaker Swords to Plowshares if you use it on them, because they get to pick the creature that dies and they get the life. But it is only a 2-drop, so it is still a solid card, but like I said, there's probably better removal. This one's a little bit more versatile though, so it really depends on the build that you're going for, whether or not you're going to want to run this. But like I said, it has its positives and its negatives. Dying Wish, when enchanted creature dies, target player loses X life and you gain X life, where X is its power. That's pretty fun. It's a 2-drop. It's not instant speed or anything like that, so you're going to kind of telegraph it in. So it's not really something that I'm too keen on. If it just said that I gained life, I would completely dismiss it, but I do like the fact that they lose life. So it is going to kind of make that creature... I mean, it's kind of hard to say because you're not going to have like a 6-power creature out there that has this. If you do, that's kind of the perfect storm. But lots of times I feel like you're going to put it on something small just as kind of an extra little way to to try and get at your opponent. Now, if you couple these cards together, if you Dying Wish something and then Devour Flesh it, which I mean, 2-card combos are really hard to pull off even in 40-card decks. But if you're able to do that, you'd obviously have the best of both worlds. That would be an amazing way to gain a bunch of life and deal damage to your opponents. That would be pretty nice. Gateway Shade, if you tap an untapped gate you control, it gets +2/+2 until end of turn. You can also just do it the old-fashioned way and give it +1/+1 pumps. So I like this guy. He's a 3-drop. That's not bad. 3-drop with, fine, 1 swamp pumps for +1/+1 is pretty good. Grizzly Spectacle is a 4-drop. It's going to destroy target non-artifact creature. That's nice removal. There's only one artifact creature in the format, so this is pretty good removal for a 4-drop, especially at common. Gutter Skulk, 2/2. It's Grizzle Zombie Rat. I love that, actually. That's kind of fun. So that's always good to have in black. You want to kind of have those in every color, obviously. So he's very playable. We've got Horror of the Dim. He's going to gain Hexproof. Okay. A little expensive for a 3/4. This is just a giant FU to tokens. Really hilarious. There is a lot of stuff that makes tokens in the format, so it's good to have in there. It's going to be a lot. I don't even know per se if it's going to see a lot of standard action, just on a standard side note, but I think it is going to drastically change the meta for a lot of people just because there were a lot of token decks and things like that floating around. I think this is really going to trim the ranks of those just in anticipation of it being played, but I don't really know how much it'll see. Killing Glare is going to destroy target creature with power X or less. That's actually a pretty good way to get rid of stuff. There are some better ways, like I said, but that's still a pretty good card for it. Lord of the Void is going to have you exile the top 7 cards of your opponent's library, and then you put a creature card from among them onto the battlefield under your control. Pretty good, but it does cost 7, so it's kind of hard to say whether or not he's going to hit. He might be worth throwing in, but I think more often than not, he's really just going to wreak havoc on your mana curve, and that's really with a lot of these high-cost spells. I like to have really one bomb that has like an enter the battlefield effect that's just going to decimate my opponent, and the rest of the time I like to keep them all low so that I can get a bunch of damage in quickly and just kind of clean up late game. Target player discards a card with Cipher. It's 4. It's just like the draws a card one. I'm not a huge fan of it. It costs a little much for me for 1 card. Midnight Recovery. Return creature card from your graveyard to your hand with Cipher. If you can get 2 creature cards for 4 mana, that's pretty damn good. So I do love that. I do like the fact that it's in a common as well. So we're going to see that quite a bit. Ogre Slumlord. Whenever another non-token creature dies, you may put a 1/1 black rat creature token onto the battlefield. They all have Death Touch. I'm not a huge fan of this card either. I don't think he's going to have too much of an impact unless you have like a lot of those rats that you have, because it's not just rat tokens, it's all rats that you control. So Sliplikkle Primordial. This is the dead one. He's got Intimidate, which is a nice trick. He only costs 7. Which is a lot, actually. I don't know why I said only. But you may put up to 1 target creature card from that player's graveyard onto the battlefield under your control. That's pretty nice. I think that will be a good way to kind of change board state, change the game. So that is bomb-worthy, I think. Whenever another black creature enters the battlefield under your control, target creature gains Intimidate until end of turn as a 1/1 for 1. That is a great card because it makes everybody give everybody else unblockable, essentially. So I really love that one. That might be my favorite of that suite of cards. Shadow Slice. Target opponent loses 3 life. It is 5 mana, but this is pretty useful in Cipher. Like I said, you wait until... See, the thing is that you do have to wait, so you'll be gripping up these cards with Cipher, and you won't want to use them right away, and sometimes that'll be the play. But this, you can do 6 damage to your opponent for 5. You don't see that a lot in black, especially anymore. It used to be you saw it a lot more often, dealing damage to him and gaining life was the big thing. But that's still not terrible. I kind of wish I gained a little bit of life from it, but as far as the mana curve goes and the fact that it's at a common, I think this is pretty much spot on. So you can do 6 damage to somebody with this card, I think, relatively easily. Slate Street Ruffian becomes blocked. Defending player discards a card. It's really only going to be one card that he gets discarded because he's a 3-drop 2/2, but still, he's not terrible. The card art's pretty friggin' awesome, so I do like that. Smog Elemental. Creatures with flying your opponent's control get Nagwa Neg. I like that. It affects things quite a bit. It's just kind of expensive for a 3/3 in this format because there's not a whole lot of flyers with 1/1. There's not a whole lot of flyers that are 1/1s that will be out on turn 6. Still 1/1s and still a viable threat. So it is a little out of place, I think, in Limited. Again, I think it's kind of just an answer to some of the decks that were becoming popular in RTR. Syndicate Enforcer has got an Extort. He's a 4-drop 3/2. He's playable, but not great. Thrall Parasite. It's not my favorite card. You got to pay 2 life, remove a counter from target non-land permanent. I definitely don't like him too much, except that he's a 1/1 for 1 with Extort, so I think that's worthwhile. So he's playable, but I don't think his ability is too fantastic. But, I mean, I might be wrong. It could play. Maybe I'm discounting the amount of counters that are going to be out there on the field. Undercity Informer, you get to sacrifice a creature. Target player reveals cards from the top of his or her library until he or she reveals a land card. And then you put those cards into his or her graveyard. That's pretty useful, I think, just by sheer fact that if it is later, you can drop this guy, and you might actually be able to just sack your way. If you have a bunch of weak guys out and you can't deal damage, you might as well try and, sack your way to a win by getting rid of all your creatures and trying to mill them. So I like him. I think he's versatile because early in the game, he's a 2/3 for 3, which isn't terrible. And if you get him late in the game, you got like 4 or 5 creatures out. You might be able to drop him down and just try and get rid of your opponent's cards so that they're going to lose next turn. That's really, I think, a pretty good card. It's a pretty good way to use him. Undercity Plague. Target player loses 1 life, discards a card, and sacrifices permanent. This is awesome. I love it. It's obviously pretty good. Rite of Precinct 6. This guy is +1/+1 for each creature card in your opponent's graveyard. He's not terrible. I mean, he's a 2-drop. I'm kind of surprised he's coming in at uncommon because he can get pretty beefy. He's not too much to worry about. There's not really too much fun with zombies in the format, especially in Limited. So I don't think it's too crazy, but it's fun. I like him. He can get a little bit beefier. It's kind of incentivizing some of these other cards and playing them a little bit more strategically with this guy out.